Welcome to lecture number 27, topic 3.12, Movement in the Early Republic. The theme for this lecture is migration and settlement. There's two learning objectives. The first is explain how and why migration and immigration to and within North America caused competition and conflict over time. The first key concept says various American Indian groups repeatedly evaluated and adjusted their alliances with the Europeans, other tribes, and the United States, seeking to limit migration of white settlers and maintain control of tribal lands and natural resources. British alliances with American Indians contributed to tensions between the United States and Britain. In 1790, Congress passes the Indian Intercourse Act, and that gives the federal government the power to take control of all the dealings with Native Americans. In the west of the United States, even up until this point, there are still British outposts in the Great Lakes region, and they are still supplying Native Americans with weapons and supplies to continue their fight against encroachment of white settlers. Whenever conflict arose with white settlers going into western lands inhabited by American Indians, the federal government continued to take the side of white settlers. This is quite different than it was at the beginning of the historical period when the British forbade further movement west in order to prevent further wars with Indian groups. The Western Confederacy, which we talked about in the last lecture, was an alliance of Native American tribes in the northwest of the United States. They had been successfully limiting settlers through 1794. This changes after the Battle of Fallen Timbers. In the Battle of Fallen Timbers, the British keep retreating Native Americans from taking shelter inside their forts in order to try and avoid war with the United States. The lack of allies, alongside the U.S. Army under Anthony Wayne burning massive cornfields to sustain Western American Indians, forced them to sign the Treaty of Greenville. The next key concept says, as increasing numbers of migrants from North America and other parts of the world continue to move westward, frontier cultures that had emerged in the colonial period continue to grow, fueling social, political, and ethnic tensions. Migrants continued to come from all over the world to the United States at a chance of owning land. The population of the United States continued to grow naturally from 1776 to the 1800s. By the year 1800, the population of the United States nearly doubled from 2.5 million to just under 5. This is a pattern that will continue into the 19th century at the same rate. That's near 100% growth every 25 years. The frontier cultures that emerged were still seen as a continuity from the colonial period. In the colonial period, you might remember the Paxton Boys, who were Scots-Irish who were living in the far western frontiers of the colonies and got into conflicts with Native Americans as they squatted in those regions. Now, in the era of the New Republic, there are new explorers that are venturing west into the newly won land for the United States and trying to organize it. Daniel Boone becomes a legend in his own time for the exploration that he did of Kentucky. He utilizes the Cumberland Gap, a route that had been used by generations of Native groups before and first made known to white settlers in the mid-1700s. However, it was his exploration that builds lore of the pioneers and the pioneer lifestyle. The lore grows further after his death in the 1800s, so by the 1850s and 1860s, he continues to be a popular figure in American memory. The painting of him crossing the Cumberland Gap on the bottom right was actually painted 40 years after he had died. The second learning objective for today is explain the continuities and changes in regional attitudes about slavery as it expanded from 1754 to 1800. And the last key concept says the expansion of slavery in the Deep South and adjacent Western lands and rising anti-slavery sentiment began to create distinctive regional attitudes towards slavery. Most of the anti-slavery supporters were usually Quakers and Mennonites. The Quakers were the ones who submitted the first petition to Congress to abolish slavery in the form of the 1790 Anti-Slavery Petition. It was penned by Benjamin Franklin, and it was urging Congress to abolish slavery altogether. They asked for urgency while the country was young and it could do so quickly so that it did not grow to become a bigger problem. Congress takes on this petition. They debate it, and given that they didn't have a Supreme Court with the powers of judicial review yet, they took on the task to decide as to whether or not they could make a law that pertains to slavery. They looked at the Constitution. They saw that the Constitution said that Congress can't make any laws in regards to the international slave trade or the importation of enslaved people from abroad until the year 1807. So they took that to mean that Congress also could not make any laws in trying to limit slavery until 1807. Sadly, their petition is unsuccessful, and Congress doesn't do anything in favor of abolishing slavery. The expansion of slavery in the early republic was due to the new popularity of the cotton crop. In 1793, the cotton gin is invented by Eli Whitney, and it helps separate the cotton fibers from the cotton seed, allowing farmers to produce more and more profitably. The expansion of cotton plantations required enslaved labor in the South, which led to the growth of the institution of slavery. The cotton gin would comb the fibers through a set of combs that would separate the seeds of the cotton and discard them into a separate compartment. The separation was necessary for the cotton to be woven into textile, and given that it was previously done by hand, it sped up the refinement process exponentially. To support new cotton agriculture, the interregional slave trade grew because as enslavers in the South looked for more enslaved labor, they looked to their neighbors up north who were not using enslaved labor as often anymore and knew would not be legal in the coming years. Between 500,000 to 1 million enslaved people were transported from northern and middle states down to the southern states. Southerners are also beginning to look to the western territories for more lands to cultivate because cotton is exhaustive of nutrients from the soil. They're looking to expand further, and as they go into new territories, they're also bringing the enslaved people with them, which means that they are expanding the territory in which slavery is practiced. That's going to be a big issue, and it's going to culminate into the Civil War in 1860. All right, here's your recap for today. American Indians and white settlers repeatedly clashed over the land. American expansion west also fueled new cultures. And finally, slavery continued to be practiced, and it grew still after the cotton gin was invented. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen. And if you are looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit APUSHslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying and look forward to seeing you back on the next lecture.